Since the release of Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix, there's been a lot of controversial opinions about this show. And I'm going to start off by saying that it's not going to ever live up to the animated series. The original is just so unique, and it has a special place in a lot of our hearts because it was a series we all grew up with. And the live action was just never going to reach those standards. However, I don't think the live action is as bad as everyone is saying it is. There are definitely things that I don't like that they've changed during it, and I think it stands on its own as its own series. And one of the things I kind of realized while watching the live action is that it was never going to be like the animated series, and the fact that it's more serious. Now, when we have live action adaptations, they usually take a more serious tone because it's easier for people to relate to that because it feels more like reality. Even though we have all this bending going on with crazy powers that we wouldn't have in real life, the more serious tone and kind of taking on that more warlike state makes a lot of sense for the series. And one of the things that the animated series always did was a lot of the scenes were really goofy because they are kids going throughout this war-torn country. It still has this goofier side to things where I don't think it would have translated as well in the live action. So I don't mind that they took out some of that goofier stuff. But in the end, by doing that, it did make some of the characters feel a little bit more flat and felt like some of the charm from the series was taken away. But this is a war-torn world that's been like this for 100 years ever since Aang was trapped in the ice, when the Fire Nation first attacked. So of course it's going to be this more serious tone for live action, because they even showed people getting burned alive by the firebenders, which is something, you don't really see in the animated series, but definitely worked and added to that more darker, serious war that we were seeing from the live action series. And I mean, the animated series was a kid's show, so obviously they weren't going to show that stuff. However, I did like that they included that in the live action. It showed us what this world was kind of like. And the animated series did touch on darker tones and themes, but not to this extent. So I feel like, there were still good things that the live action brought to the series, but it did lose some of that charm by taking away some of that goofier side and not having as many episodes. Especially because the live action took elements from different episodes and merged them together. Perfect example of this is when we meet the Mechanist in Omashu, where we don't meet him in the Omashu in the animated series, we meet him in the Northern Air Temple, where they combined Jet's storyline as well with the Mechanist storyline, which again, that didn't happen in the animated series. So a lot of things kind of got moved around and combined so that we would still get these big moments from the series, but slightly changed. Which I am a little disappointed that they did merge those two storylines, because the Northern Air Temple was a big deal because this inventor had taken it over and in a sense desecrated the Northern Temple in Aang's eyes at first. It was a big moment for his character as well, so I'm not a big fan that they got rid of that, and I feel like it should have stood on its own, but I still feel like what they did semi-worked. And we'll talk more about it as we go episode by episode, because we will be doing that in this review. But before we get into the episode by episode part, I just want to say that the CG was fantastic. All the bending looked really cool, and I heard someone complaining about like the earth bending being a little too slow, but I think it all really worked. Like the opening sequence with the firebender and the earthbender looked sick. And so much of the bending looked really awesome on screen, and I like what they did. And I feel like it's going to look even cooler where we do get to the later seasons. However, the one thing I am disappointed in is that we did not get enough Momo and Appa. However, their CG designs did look cool. Moreover, as we go into this review, there were a handful of things that I didn't really agree with them changing, but also some stuff that I think worked out really well for the show. So with that, let's start with episode 1, and we'll go episode by episode. So right off the bat with episode 1, they changed a lot, and they fast-tracked a lot of things, with it being an exposition dump episode, giving us the war starting, having the Fire Nation attack the air nomads and wipe them out. We didn't see that in the animated series till way later, and even then, we didn't get it to this gruesome of a scene because it was realistic, showing us that war, what it really meant to be a firebender, burning these people alive. Like, it was really dark, and I think it worked for the live action, but it probably wouldn't have worked for an animated kid show. Now, the thing is with this too, we actually see Aang get trapped in ice, where we didn't learn about any of that and how it all happened till almost the end of season 1 in the animated series, which wasn't a change I didn't mind because it kind of brought us into it. People who are not familiar with this world, it just kind of brought them right into it, what's going on, who these characters are, and I think it was a great exposition dump. Now, with saying that, I will say that one of the things I wasn't a big fan of was Zuko's scar. I feel like it needed to be more prominent on his face, and it felt a little too minimal. I don't know why they chose to do it that way, maybe something with just practicality when doing the makeup, but I was kind of disappointed that the scar wasn't more half his face. Now, with saying that, it's only a small complaint, it's nothing really major, and I think the actor playing Zuko did a really good job playing the character, because at first when I watched the animated series, I hated Zuko. I would despise him. He was so annoying, but he grows on you, and I think the actor is doing a good job kind of portraying that you're annoying, I don't want to deal with you, stop going after our main characters, but eventually he'll kind of grow on us and we want to see him have that redemption arc. Now, with things stuff that I didn't really like, I hated the fact that Aang was flying without his glider. Like, they did it at the very beginning of the episode with the air nomads, and then they did it again when he was at the water tribe. But other than that, he didn't do it at all for the rest of the series, and I don't understand what was the point of showing him literally flying without his glider, and I don't like that they had that. It really felt like they didn't need it. That's the whole point. They aren't supposed to be able to fly without it. Again, some people were saying this is like a little nitpicky, but they're not Superman. The air nomads, well, at least Aang, should not be able to fly around like that. Lastly, another complaint I saw from episode 1 was that Katara blocked Zuko's attack instead of Aang doing it, which I don't think was a bad thing. I think that was a good moment, showing that she has the strength to be a waterbender. It wasn't anything major, it just kind of gave her a cool moment. I mean, in the end, I think episode 1 was a strong start to the show. Not every episode was amazing. There were a few that were like, eh, but I think episode 1 did a good job introducing us to the characters and giving us the world building we kind of needed to set up this world. And of course, Iroh is amazing, and I didn't doubt he wasn't going to be at all. I can't wait to see more Iroh for sure, but unfortunately, even with this episode being a good start, there were moments, like I said before, that the characters felt a little flat. I feel like it was a mix of the acting and the writing, but hopefully as they kind of pick up the pace, they learn their roles a little bit more and they get more comfortable with it, we do get a season 2 with them being more flushed out and not feeling as flat, because I feel like these are younger actors. They're still getting into the roles. Some of them haven't done a lot of stuff, but they are getting there, and I do like the casting. Well, most of the casting. But as I say that, let's go into episode 2, where this episode continued to make a lot of major changes from the original story, but I think some of them worked, because this is where we went to the Kyoshi Warriors, which I love the Kyoshi Warriors in the animated series, because you had Sokka kind of falling on his ass, thinking himself as this whole high and mighty character who's better than the girls, but then he gets his ass whooped by Suki, and I love those moments. I'm kind of disappointed that we lost those moments in this, where we had Sokka dress up as one of the Kyoshi Warriors and help them fight, but I did really like seeing awkward Sokka, but also having that riz and being able to have that charm with the girls, and I really liked him and Suki. Also, Maria Zhang is a fantastic casting, and I am now getting a lot of stuff on my TikTok just simping for her, which I think is really funny because I saw one TikTok and now they just keep coming. The one thing I do wish we had during this scene, though, was Sokka putting aside his pride and asking Suki to train. That would have been a really good moment. They did train together, but it wasn't the same. However, I will say that the Suki and Sokka versus the Fire Nation was pretty cool, and I liked seeing them work together. Now, everything with Kyoshi was sick. This was a new addition to the story, kind of giving us more about Kyoshi and giving us more of Aang's journey. Now, I really liked how it showed the different ideologies between avatars, where Kyoshi was more the one that got things done and was more of a force to be reckoned with than anyone else. And I really liked how that she took over and kind of whooped everyone's asses, because that was an awesome scene. Now, in the animated series, Aang leaves the village as it's burning down, and he wasn't able to save it, and he felt bad about it, because it was kind of one of those things where he felt like going to this village, it was his fault. He caused all this problems. But in this, they kind of fixed that before he left. In the end, I thought that was a great, strong episode with the Kyoshi Warriors giving us Kyoshi herself, and then also hyping us up for seeing more Suki later down the road. So I can't wait to see more of that stuff. And as we go into that, we'll go into episode 3 and 4, which I'll combine because they were episodes taking place in the same place in Omashu together. And right off the bat, we gotta say we got cabbages. But really, I think episode 3 felt the weakest compared to the rest of the season. I didn't like that they fast-tracked stuff for these 2 episodes. Having Azula, May, and Ty Lee show up felt super out of place. They kind of just put May and Ty Lee in the background there just to show, hey, look at these characters, they're coming. But they felt so bland because they weren't doing anything. They were just in the background while Azula was training. And I really liked the introduction of Azula in the animated series because she seemed a lot more sinister, evil. And in this, she just didn't feel like that. And I feel like they were definitely trying to set her up as that threat for the next season. However, I don't think they did it in the right way. And that major complaint kind of goes for the rest of the episodes when they show up, because again, they felt out of place, kind of showing that she was working with Zhao the whole time. I mean, like, yeah, I get it. They were trying to set her up as someone that's manipulating things behind the scenes. I don't think it was needed, and I think they should have saved her for the end, like they did in the original series. Moreover, like I said in the beginning, the Mechanist shows up in Omashu, which I did feel like was an odd choice, but I guess they didn't want to have another location to the series, so they kind of kept it all in one, just to kind of make things flow a little bit quicker, because they only had 8 episodes compared to 20. And really, the Mechanist was kind of only there to add the very important part of the story about the airships and the Fire Nation getting them. That was a key part of the information that they wanted to introduce with Omashu, even though I don't think they needed him there. I feel like they should have kept him in the Northern Air Temple and had Aang go there on their journey, where they really felt like they didn't go on this giant journey like they do in the season, because they only went to a few locations and then boom, they're at the Northern Water Tribe. So it was kind of like things like that where they kind of rushed into things. Now, the thing is, the acting did feel a little bit more rough in episode 3, unlike the later ones where it started to feel a little bit better. I do think the actors were still getting their footing at this time, and it wasn't all bad. Like, I think the tussle between Zuko and Aang was a lot of fun, and I really liked how they did that. Now, when we got into episode 4 with more of the Boomy stuff, it was really weird, because Boomy felt like this evil, sinister character, unlike in the animated series, where he did feel weird and odd, but he still recognized Aang as his friend. And in the animated series, Aang didn't realize it was Boomy until way later, where in this, he realized right away. So Boomy acting a little bit evil and sinister felt out of place, because Aang already realized that it was his friend. That was one of the things I had a problem with his story, where Boomy still felt like this weird character, which I liked, but at the same time, he just felt like an ass. He didn't feel like Aang's friend. He felt like someone who was betraying Aang. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense what they were trying to do here. Like, I understand what they wanted to do because it'd been 100 years. Boomy felt betrayed by his friend who had disappeared. The Avatar, the one that was supposed to save them, vanished and left them all to fend for themselves. And in 100 years, Boomy probably had a bunch of stuff to deal with as the leader of this nation. So I understand why they did it, but I don't like it. Now, the Badger Mole stuff was pretty interesting because the Badger Mole looked pretty cool, and I like the Sokka and Katara scenes we got during that because they kind of helped them kind of build their relationship as brother and sister, realize that they both make mistakes. They're both going through a lot after the trauma they've dealt with their mother and father, so I like that, and also Sokka realizing that his sister isn't a kid that needs protection anymore and she can fend for herself. So I like how they did that because they progressed their characters. However, they did take this scene from the animated series in season 2, Katara and Aang, and because it's like this lover's tunnel, it's more about the relationship and all of that stuff. And even the singers are from season 2, so they fast-tracked this little scene as well, which was kind of weird. They just like fast-tracking stuff just for some reason. And also having Iroh showing the Earthbender compassion after being captured with a classic Iroh thing, because the Earthbender was belittling him, targeting him, smacking him around, and it was a really good moment to show how Iroh isn't a bad person and that he was only a soldier following orders in a war, showing that it's not all black and white. People don't just do these bad things for any reason. They're following the orders of their commanders, and just kind of adding more to that war-torn country. Honestly, everything with Iroh was awesome. I love his character. I loved it from the animated series, and I just love seeing him again in live action. Now, as we continue down the series, let's talk about episode 5. Because when we got to episode 5, that's when we got to the spirit realm stuff, which I really like the spirit realm stuff from Avatar. It's really interesting. It's cool. But they made a lot of changes to that storyline. I had mixed feelings about this episode because of how much they changed, even though I like this kind of stuff. But I loved it and was disappointed all at the same time. I have just a lot of mixed feelings about what was going on because, first of all, Hybe looked awesome. I really liked how they designed this character. It was cool to see Katara and Sokka get pulled into the spirit realm and having them live their worst nightmares, kind of showing what they've gone through, like having these really good moments, but at the same time, I feel like they didn't need that. Hybe looking like a monster was really cool. I do think we should have got a little bit more of Aang protecting the village from Hybe and sending him back in the forest like we do in the animated series, instead of having them fight Hybe semi in the forest, everyone get knocked off course, and then Sokka, Katara, and Aang getting separated. In the animated series as well, we had Roku's dragon taking Aang to Roku's temple to show him where he needs to go next, and I like that moment from the series, which in this series, we didn't even see that, which in the Owl Spirit, we don't actually meet until book 2, which is season 2, when they're in the desert. So they changed that as well. They kind of fast-tracked all the spirit realm stuff to be like, okay, these are all these characters, especially with Ko, because we don't meet Ko until like the very end of the season when Aang goes to the spirit realm while all the shit's going on at the Northern Water Temple. And then having it like kind of over and done with in 2 episodes felt very rushed, and I don't like how they kept merging these stories together. It's a different take on the media, and I do get that, and I agree that we should be changing stuff up slightly, but there's some key moments I really wish they kept the same as the animated series. Because when we went into episode 6 with Katara and Sokka still stuck in the spirit realm, with Ko and Aang going to see Roku by himself, it kind of changed that whole storyline. Because when he goes to see Roku, we had Katara and Sokka originally getting through the fire temple with him, avoiding the ones that are betraying the Avatar and having the one that helps them track him down, and then having them go against Zuko and Zhao. Like, I like those moments from the anime series. It kind of added stakes, them getting captured and everything like that. It is kind of annoying what they did with Roku, because in the original series, he was the first Avatar that Aang went to because he was the one that preceded him. And I really don't understand why they chose to do Kyoshi first, maybe fan service, even though I didn't hate that scene. Roku did feel like he was underplayed, and then they made him a little bit more comedic than he honestly should have been, because he's serious in the animated series series, he's telling Aang about Sozin's comment, and he warns him about the upcoming threat. But in this, they got rid of all that. It felt a little odd that we were getting advice for Ko, and then them kind of dealing with that right away. But I did love what happened in the second half of this episode, even though I was kind of disappointed they rushed past the Roku stuff. Mostly because we got the blue spirit, and I've always loved the blue spirit part from the animated series because I am a sucker for a redemption arc. So having Zuko come in and save Aang from Zhao was great. I think the whole fight scene looked awesome, and I really liked having them kind of work together. Now, when they escaped Zhao, they added more to Zuko and Aang's interaction than they did in the animated series, where the animated series, Aang is talking to Zuko as he wakes up, asking him if he thinks they could have been friends, and then Zuko firing at him and Aang leaving. Where in this, we have more of Aang talking to him, trying to tell him he can be better, setting up that redemption arc even more. So I do like that interaction, because it's like Aang knowing that Zuko can be a good person because Zuko came in to help him. Even if it seemed like Zuko was doing it to capture the Avatar himself, he still had some good in his heart, and I really liked that scene. And again, the blue spirit part was probably my favorite part out of all the episodes. Now, when it comes to episode 7, I feel like I don't have as much to say. It was a solid episode other than the Azula stuff, which was my major problem introducing her throughout the series. But I will say seeing the lightning bending was kind of cool, and I just wish they saved that for the later seasons. But I liked how they had the confirmation of Yui being in the spirit world when Sokka saw the fox. Like, I really liked that because it was new to the series, but I liked how they kind of teased it beforehand. Also, Sokka is just continuing to be a Riz master during this. I really liked him and Yui together. There was some scenes that just didn't feel 100% the best between the two characters, but I did like how they did it. Plus, we had the fight between Pakku and Katara, which I think looked really cool. However, at this point in the series, because we didn't see Katara doing a lot of bending and trying to prove herself to everyone, it did feel a little off as she was trying to do it to Pakku, but it did lead into a good moment where she got other women to help with the water bending and fight back. Like, it was a good moment having them fight up, making Pakku see the world differently. But this was a lot darker than the animated series because so many people died. Because when we got into episode 8, when all this terrible stuff happened, episode 8 was probably one of the best episodes from the season, especially with everything they did with the choreography, the spirit realm, and the destruction that went on during it. I was actually surprised to see Momo get a hero moment and then almost die. When Momo got hit, I was like, holy shit, did they just try to kill Momo? Because it just felt like we barely saw Momo the entire season, and then we see him like save someone and then almost die instantly. Like, it just made no sense. Now, the Katara versus Zuko fight was really cool, and I really liked how they did it. I can't wait till we get a rematch. Just having her show off her skills and also Zuko show off his, just some more great moments. The one thing I was worried that they weren't going to do originally was Zhao killing the moon spirit and having it all turn dark and into chaos, but they did it. It looked awesome. And having Iroh threatening his own nation and taking his stand for the spirit realm was fantastic because he almost says exactly word for word what he does in the original series. And having Aang give the ocean spirit a vessel to send off its rage was fantastic. The giant form looked awesome, and I loved what they did. That was probably one of my favorite moments from the series because I was kind of worried they wouldn't do that. It's a giant CGI water monster, and there's a lot of things I was worried about it, but it looked awesome. Also, having Yue do her sacrifice to save everyone was fantastic. They did it a little differently from the animated series, but I think it still really worked. Because in this, they really showed us how dark this world was and how the war has more death than the original series did. Because like I said before, a lot of people died. And they did a lot of things where they just kind of showed the consequences of war. I really like how they did that because they just kind of added more stakes to everything going on, saying, hey, people can actually die. Obviously not our main characters, but all these side characters who are around trying to help them have a chance to die. And it just kind of shows that this is war. So I like how they did that. Like, again, there were things I wasn't a big fan of in this series, but they did do a lot of stuff that worked. Now, when we talk about overall thoughts for this series, I do think that the show was overall pretty good. Like, yeah, I did have its weaker episodes, and there was some stuff that, again, didn't work, but I don't think we were ever going to get a shot-for-shot replica. It was always going to be slightly different than the original, and I think they did a pretty good job making it stand on its own. And like I said earlier, some of the acting did fall flat, but I think it slowly got better as the series went on. And I do have high hopes for season 2, especially when Toph makes her appearance. And I swear to God, they better not mess her up because she's one of the best characters in the series, and it'll be pretty goddamn awesome when we get her. And I do like the more serious tone they're going with. I do hope they do a little bit more goofier things just to give these characters some charm, but I like how they have it. Plus, all the scenery looked amazing, and the CG creature looked awesome. Now, as someone who lives in British Columbia, it was really cool to see the nature in the background because I just kept thinking that's home, because it was. The show was shot in Canada, and it's pretty awesome to see kind of some of these shots go on. Now, I also feel like Katara has a lot of growth growing. It didn't really feel like she learned a lot of waterbending during this season, where in the original series, she felt like she was learning a lot more, training, because we did see her train with Aang as well during it. But we didn't get that in this series, which I do hope that they don't skip past the training in the next season and we get to see more of them learning how to bend. So it doesn't seem like they just know what they're doing and that they're already good at it without that kind of training montage. So I was kind of annoyed that they did that. That was like one of my annoying things, is where that they took a lot of the time where we'd see these characters mingling, hanging out, camping, and training. They took out all that and just kind of went from story to story to story, where we need that time to have these characters mingle, kind of get that relationship growing. And they definitely didn't have that, especially with Momo and Appa, who are big characters in the show, who didn't even feel like characters at all in the live action because we barely saw them. That was also just a big complaint for me, is that these characters, Momo and Appa, aren't just side characters. They're a big part of the story, and they need to be part of the story with these characters because they have a bigger impact later on. That's why when Momo almost died, he didn't really feel like anything other than like, oh shit, Momo almost died. I feel like they need to fix that for season 2, and I hope they take a lot of the complaints from season 1 to kind of just correct what we want fixed. But I do hope we get a season 2 because I can't wait to see Toph. Let's just slide this in right now, because I don't know how I didn't realize this when I was recording my review in the first place, is that something that is actually now starting to really bother me because I learned out. And that was the fact that Aang did not learn how to waterbend at all during the first season, which he literally does in the animated series. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, that we never saw that, and it kind of ties back to my complaint about them not really hanging out as a group and training, because we never saw that. Even though I don't hate the live action series, I do hate now that they didn't include that, and I can't believe I didn't pick up on that when I first watched it. You can kind of see that the busyness in life can kind of make you miss things like that. And I still can't believe it. I am flabbergasted. Plus, while I was recording my scenes for this video, I also realized that they didn't include the Earthbender prison, where they revolted and had like a revolution of breaking out of the prison against the Fire Nation. Like some really big key moments that they left out of it. And I'm kind of hoping, again, they fix this in season 2. Because it would be great if they did and kind of fix some of the pacing problems and not skip over a bunch of important story. But in the end, we all have our own opinions, and being a fan of the original series or not, some people are going to love the show, some people aren't. And I do think we can just kind of, if we can kind of separate this from the original series, you will probably enjoy it a lot more. So let me know, what did you think of this series when you watched it? What were some of your biggest complaints? What would you have done differently? I hope you enjoyed this review. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button to stay up to date with all my review and breakdown videos, and I might do more like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.